Hello and welcome to the short Vort on Parshas Bamidar. And our teaser question is, how is it possible that twin brothers, identical twin brothers, can have different bar mitzvah parshas? But first, let's discuss Shevii of the parsha in Perek Dalet. It says, Nasos Rosh B'nei Kahas. Take a census of the family of Kahas, from those 30 to 50, Lasos Malacha Bo'ol Moed, to do Malacha in the Ol Moed, and then it says something about doing Avoda. So we have three questions here. First, if Gershon was the older of brothers of Gershon, Kas, Merari, why here is Kahas listed first? Second question is the language of Naso, to take a census with a word of lifting, versus a word of counting, like it says Tifkodo Sam by the other brothers, by Gershon and Merari. And then finally, it says Malacha and it says Avoda by Kahas. By the other brothers, it just says Avoda. So why does it say Malacha by Kahas? So the Malbim answers that Naso is because Kahas was elevated, it was lifted to this most holy of tasks, to carry the Aron, the holy ark, as well as other parts of the Mishkan, the Shulchan, the menorah. And then because of this elevated item, it was more distinguished, and therefore it says lift up, as opposed to counting, to lift up their heads to be counted. And so why does it say Avoda? Because their job with the Aron was a higher level. It took a mental activity, mental malachas machsheves. They had to keep their thoughts purified throughout when they were holding this. But there was also a physical aspect, and therefore it also says avoda by them. But by Gershon and by Merari, their work did not require that elevated intellectual level. They just required the physical carrying that they would do, and therefore it only says avoda. And if we continue on in the Pesukim, a few Pesukim later, it talks about when they were traveling, that you had the Aron, and that the Aron was covered with a piece of leather, and then on top of it there was the tcheles, a blue wool that covered it. However, by the other items that they were transferring from the Mishkan, whether it's the Shulchan, the menorah, the showbread, so there it says that they had the blue wool covering, and then on top of the blue wool was leather. But by the Arons, the only one where the blue wool was on top of the leather versus the other way around. Why was that? So the Malbim answers this also and says that the Aron was on a higher level of Kedusha even when they traveled. By the other parts of the Beis Mikdash, by the Mishkan, the articles had their Kedusha was muted. They didn't sustain that holiness. But the Aron, even when they traveled, the Kruvim were looking at each other and were facing each other. The Dechelis is something representing the blue sky, the Kisei HaKavod, the holy throne, and therefore the symbolism here is to make sure that on the outside, since it was able to pierce through this leather even when it traveled, so therefore they put the Dechelis on the top. But by all the other items, the Dechelis was below, covered by the leather. So getting back to the question, how could it be that two twin brothers, identical ones, have different parshios? So that would be a year like this year, which we've discussed for Bahar B'Chukosai, why we have not caught up to Eretz Yisrael. This week Eretz Yisrael is landing Parshas Naso, and we in America are reading Bamidar. But if one brother was in America this week for his bar mitzvah, then he'd be reading Parshas Bamidar. That would be his bar mitzvah parsha. But if the other brother was in Eretz Yisrael at the same time, separated by the Atlantic Ocean, then his bar mitzvah parsha would be Naso, and that's how you'd be able to have a difference. So you could even travel in midweek. Monday you get an aliyah for Bamidar, the proper reading, and on Thursday you get a reading of Naso if you got an aliyah then. So thank you for listening. Have a wonderful week and a wonderful Shabbos.